So listen to this. How does a college dropout from Bristol, England go from selling TVs to building one of the most admired and awarded web design studios in the world? That's what we're here to find out in this episode of Low Key Legends. I sit down to chat with Nathan Riley, the design director at Unseen Studio, to learn how he did it, but also dive into his story and find out what might be next in the world of digital and 3D design. Unseen is a brand, digital, and motion design studio that creates refreshingly unexpected ideas and striking visuals that help bold brands cut through the noise. Nathan shares how he got into 3D design after several members of his team introduced him to Cinema 4D. He started experimenting, which caused a chain reaction that would change the course of the studio fundamentally forever. So make sure you grab a pen and paper because you're going to want to take notes, and let's get into the episode with Nathan Riley. Nathan, thank you so much for being here and coming on the show. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. Really nice to be talking to you.
You can't believe everything that you read on the internet, but I saw something that you built or made your first website at age 14. Is that true? And what is the story? And is there a client or did you just make it for yourself?
Well, you've done the deep dive. I like it. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my entry into web design, really. That was the first thing, and it's definitely not for a client. That was just me and my buddy sort of we were really into skateboarding at the time, so we just sort of learnt, sort of taught ourselves how to do a bit of design and a bit into like web hosting, and I think it was Front Page back then and Dreamweaver, stuff like that. Like really going back a little bit in terms of the tech, but it's really just to satisfy our own sort of curiosity, I suppose, just to have like a little site to put our videos on and that sort of things.
I'm curious about the trajectory of the agency and how you started to where you are now.
Where do you want to start, I suppose?
What made you want to start the studio? Was it that you were taking these little odd jobs here and there, you had to make money and pay rent, and you were just like, okay, this is a skill that I have?
I guess it comes back to the naivety of when you're starting out, and you just don't know. You just don't know what the industry is. Like when we started the company, myself and the other guys, I'm sure we'll come on to pretty quickly. When we started, we really had no agency experience prior to starting the company. So we were all fresh out of university. We kind of done like odd jobs. Like I've been doing a bit of freelancing. One of the guys has sort of done a bit of time at a kind of agency, but it wasn't really a web agency at all. So we just came in extremely fresh, and like there was no expectation with that. You kind of, it helps you out of uni. Your rent's like next to nothing. There's not much to lose, I guess, at that point. So it's a lot easier to start at that kind of age. But yeah, I think that for me personally, it was more the desire I was really into just creating stuff, designing. I was always quite obsessed by design, I suppose. And like, even if I didn't really see it as a career, I was always wanting to be making stuff. So, then the opportunity came around just by chance, really, just meeting Tom and Rollo. Like I met them through a friend of mine. They just happened to be, Tom was working with a friend of mine, so like a mutual friend, just doing a random job, completely not associated to design work at all. And this was after I dropped out of uni. I was kind of, I was actually selling TVs for a job. I was in like an electronics store. And yeah, just doing a bit of freelance stuff on the side. So it's when, I guess, I didn't really necessarily even see myself starting an agency or studio. I didn't have that mindset. I wasn't necessarily on that path. I was more just chipping away, kind of, just getting by and just doing a few bits of design here and there. I knew I wanted to make it into a career, but I didn't know exactly what, I suppose. So yeah, then meeting those guys, they already were kind of, starting to talk about maybe actually starting an agency, and that was something I was just immediately like, yes, like 100% want to be involved in that. My friend kind of he basically knew that roughly what I wanted to do. I was like really interested in design, and also Tom, the other co-founder, he was also kind of having similar conversations with him, and it's like, this just makes sense to have these guys meet and see what happens. So yeah, I've got a lot to thank him for. But yeah, I guess that's the origins of how we started. Like effectively, we were just in a really tiny office, just like, you never know like what job was going to come in. I remember doing our first like well-paid website for £500, splitting that between the three of us, and that being like a
Oh,
good
you're
payday.
rich.
And I was like, right, this is it now. This is a career. And it took us like 3 months to build it, so it was definitely not a money maker. But in that same vein, it's like even just be getting paid for it, we were just so psyched to be doing that, and just seeing that this is something we can, if we just work harder, we can make more of this and do more of this and turn it into a bigger opportunity, I suppose.
Yeah, you had mentioned how you always had this desire to make things and create. And it seems like experimentation and passion projects and just making for yourself is ingrained, maybe in you specifically, but it seems like it's translated to a lot of members of the studio over the course of the years. I especially think about kind of the heyday of Dribbble, where everyone I feel like was chasing the green chameleon either style or just trying to keep up with the amount of cool things that you were doing. And so I'm curious, well, one, how you were able to keep up the volume. Was it sheer determination, or was it just a marketing play, if you will, to attract attention and do the type of projects that you wanted to? So kind of like creating your own dream clients by making that work.
I'm glad we get a chance to talk. I could talk about this for hours. It was because it's such like a formative part of our the building of the agency. It's such a big part of it. So we weren't like one of the OG people or teams on it. We kind of slowly found out what it was, and then kind of that just built. We were using it for inspiration. We were like we've got to get on this. It's clearly a really good platform to be on, to sort of just build that kind of community, and just where we're based, there wasn't loads of agencies like us, and there wasn't really anyone doing the kind of work we wanted to do. So having that kind of global community where we could really get inspired and really see what the level, where the level should be. So that was a big part of it. And I remember earlier on, I was reading a blog post from Focus Lab, who were absolutely massive on Dribbble, in the early days. And I think it was one of the founders, Bill, saying 25% of their revenue was from Dribbble alone. And I think that just blew my mind and just sort of ignited something where I was like, oh, so we can just really go at this and post, as much work as we can. Obviously without trying to sacrifice quality. We're always about the quality, but it just seems so obvious. If we just keep working at this, we can build a studio, build a bigger studio, better clients, really kind of amp things up a bit. And I guess it came down, we originally had a team account, so everything was posted on the Green Chameleon team account. And then we kind of got we invited ourselves as individuals, so that kind of gave us a little boost. I don't know if you remember, you had the debut shots. So when you first joined, you get that debut, and if you did well on that, then it kind of just ramped things up. You get a load of followers as off the back of that debut. So we just really went for it at that stage, and I remember. It was obsessive. I'll be honest. It was to a fault. It got a bit much at times, but I don't know. There's something weird. I'm not very competitive, in terms of sports or anything like that. I'm just the least competitive. I'm just not, mainly because I'm not very good at any sports. But when it came to the design side of things, it was just something I could really. I knew I could just really push and really focus on, and there was a competitive element that came out of that, and I think that just. Obviously, then you're seeing leads coming in and just seeing the kind of traction you're building, and it's addictive. It kind of just snowballs, and it's hard to stop that snowball once it starts rolling, I guess.
Well, it's so interesting because it's I feel like once you get momentum, the fear is losing that momentum, because it can be so much harder to continue. Well, if you go to a dead stop, then it's so much extra work to get that momentum rolling again. And I'm on the same wavelength, where I took Dribbble super seriously like a sport, because it probably was at the early years when I was freelancing prior to Rogue, I would say 25 or more percent of just my revenue. It wasn't referral, it wasn't anything like that. It was just hustling, posting things, sharing things, trying to be on every channel. But Dribbble was kind of the main one that was bringing in sort of work gigs with other studios or small startups or whatever it was. And I would just take anything, because it was okay, if I do the work and do a good job, then I can post it on Dribbble and repeat the cycle
Yeah,
and get
yeah,
more work forever.
yeah. I don't know if it's the same for you, but for us, for me, it was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway, so I might as well get paid, even if it's like a minimal amount. I might as well
Yeah,
get a few dollars in to post a Dribbble shot,
exactly.
which is not a good. It's not a good business plan. It's not a good way of like treating clients necessarily. But I think that was
Mhm.
certainly at that phase. It was like, yeah, it was always, can we get a good shot out of this? Which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy to think back.
Agencies, studios are always thinking like, oh, is this project going to be a case study project? Can we put this on our website? And yeah, it was like that mentality with Dribbble. Can we get like a couple good shots? If it's not a good project, at least we can like style it for Dribbble to make it cool.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
and that's like a huge business model. And I feel like it taught me the value of making things and experimenting and just trying things. Because what I found is that while I was always working, none of my other friends had that same mentality. And when they were done with work, they were done with work. I was like, no,
Mm.
I'm going to go home and like probably design till like 1 a.m. And I just thought that was natural or normal.
That's so. It's like an echo. It's like that's literally how my experience went. Yeah. Is that friends that were in the same industry, or just people that
It
had slightly different
all,
jobs and 9 to 5s?
yeah. I think all industries, but mainly design. Like my friends that I graduated from uni with, they would get a job and like work, and
Mm.
then just like maybe they would do a freelance project. I would have friends that I would do like a couple of projects with as a group or a team and just have fun. But generally, they weren't like kind of taking the time to make things outside of work because they're like, no, I do this all day. I can stop.
Yeah, my friends definitely were kind of like, why are you doing that? Why are you still working? And I think it was to be honest though, that's a difference of like having a job you really love, and I'd be kind of doing it if I wasn't getting paid for it, and well, ultimately I wasn't getting paid for that because that was just purely dribble shots and that kind of thing. So yeah, I can see why it kind of looked weird at the time, but yeah, had the exact same experience. To be honest, I don't know. That comes back to that whole slightly obsessive thing. It was something I couldn't really. It wasn't like didn't like, by no means. I'm not saying it was really bad. It controlled my life or anything like that. But it was just like something I had to do. I couldn't. It wasn't just like I was gonna one day just I'm not gonna bother with Dribbble anymore. It's like it was such a big part of our kind of growing the company. So it's hard to ignore, I guess.
Yeah, and especially if it is like helping to bring in those clients, it felt like an essential part of just like a marketing plan. Like some people are cold emailing or going to networking events, but if you're not like in an area where there's any networking events, and if you're trying to attract a global audience, it's like how do you leverage the platforms in order to find the clients that you're looking for? And to me that was just like, I think I'm going to use this and try at least.
Yeah, and I think that comes on to what you're saying about kind of concept work, and that was a big part of it as well. It wasn't just posting the work we were doing. It was certainly just making up briefs and just designing for the companies we wanted to be working with. And I think there's a certain amount of like naysaying and sort of it gets put down a lot. Like you shouldn't work for free. You shouldn't do these unsolicited concept designs and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I just think go for it. It's like you might as well. It's much better to use a real client, a real company, and just reimagine something than just try and come up with the whole brief from the get go. So
Mhm.
honestly, it served us really well, and I think maybe it's discouraged these days, but I do think there's a lot people could learn from doing that simple exercise. Fair enough, if you're established already, then maybe you don't want to be posting these big brand redesigns just like for fun. But I think
Yeah.
if you are starting out, there's a big upside to it.
And I mean, like, there's not really any harm unless, well, actually, my favorite Dribble story, and I can, so it'll touch into like there's no harm, but I did a conceptual redesign of Boston Calling's website. Boston Calling is like a a big Boston-based concert series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I posted it just for fun, but maybe the description wasn't as detailed about like, hey, this is concept work, this is fake, like not for the
Yeah.
actual company. Like I don't even
Mm-hmm.
know what I wrote. Maybe I didn't write anything. Like I have no idea at the time. And I was working at an agency at the time, And Boston Calling calls the agency that I work at so that they can get in touch with me so that they can tell me to cease and desist. Otherwise, lawyers are going to be involved.
Oh, shit.
And I was
That's
like,
crazy.
I'm like, this is fake, man. Like, and they were like, we just talked with a couple of our artists and people are dropping out because of this. I'm like, we both know that's not true. I'm going to take it down and then we don't have to talk again. And it's just like,
that was just something you posted on Dribbble. They just happened to see it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Maybe they were doing like an email, like a word scrape or something, or maybe
like reverse searched it or something.
Yeah, and just to like make sure, because like it wasn't like anything was released yet. But I must have accidentally guessed some of the people that were in their lineup, so they were like really pissed about it.
God, that's such a chance thing to happen, isn't it? You can make it up.
No, exactly.
We always felt a little bit weird about it. I don't know. Just sometimes you'd be like, oh, should we be using big brands? But then I don't know. Like, I think for the most part, it's fine. And if you are using it, it's just like a learning practice. You know, I think generally we've never had any issues. I think generally speaking, don't quote me on that, but I think it's generally okay to do. Yeah, it was a big part of our like just personally for me, just learning. I think it was really helped me just hone in on my skills. And we just, as you mentioned, we're in Bristol in the UK. It's not even London. It's like one of the smaller cities in the UK. So I think just we've always struggled to get those bigger clients. And I think anything we can do to just kind of build our taste and kind of offering to attract those kind of bigger names was always on the agenda. And I think that was just like I don't think we do it now, but I think, back in the day, we were sort of starting out, it's definitely a big part of it.
In this kind of new post-COVID world, have new opportunities and the borders of work kind of broken down a little bit more for you? I'm just thinking about the latest release I've seen as of this recording was the sort of salary calculator that you did with Contra, which is an American company.
Contra guys are always very fun to work with, always giving us really fun briefs. But to answer the question about like post-COVID, I think that definitely did open doors for us. It opened up, I think, just the whole mentality to sort of remote work, whether that's on your team or whether that's with other companies that you're partnering with. I think that kind of really opened up to us. So yeah, we definitely noticed a spike in American clients. I think that's the biggest change for us post-COVID. It's kind of, just a lot of American requests, a lot of requests from America. And I mean, I'm trying to, it's really hard to pin, it kind of all just blurs into one when you're talking about COVID and what happened. But yeah, I do remember there was like quite a big lull as it was all happening. And then after that, quite quickly, things picked up and we did notice like a big influx. I think Contra, they were one of our kind of fairly early kind of big US clients that we were working with. So doing our first project with them, that was kind of quite soon after COVID. And that, it just kind of opened our eyes a little bit. You know, the sort of US sort of startup world, I think there's a lot of great companies kind of coming out of that. And with that, they want like great marketing and websites. So definitely like a noticeable change, I suppose.
I want to put a pin in that for a second and just do kind of a breakdown of what does the team look like now at Unseen? Like how many people, what are the roles and responsibilities, and how has your role as a design leader changed in this new era of Unseen?
So in terms of the general, like, I guess, management of the studio, it's myself, the design director, it's Tom, creative director, Rollo, business director. So we're the three that founded it. We've then got three on the sort of account management, client services side of things. And that, that's in our studio, certainly it's quite a broad term. It's a bit of project management, it's a bit of client management, it's a bit of just general keeping the team happy and, like keeping the cogs moving. So yeah, it's something we're looking into at the moment, of like bringing a bit more official like project management roles into the company. But for now, that's kind of, it's quite a broad mix. And, us as founders as well, we do a lot of sort of project management and just general oversight, of course. And then on the design team, we have, we've got kind of a mixture of 3D designers, motion designers, kind of UI, brand designer, and I guess with all of that, it's kind of, everyone has to wear many hats. We really try and attract people that they don't just do one thing. They kind of bring more than just that core skill to the table. Even just down to one of our designers, Charlie, he's got a bit of a background in sort of sound design. So we've had many projects where he's just been able to jump into a bit of sound design just to do a bit of audio on a project. So even just strange things like that, where you wouldn't expect people to have these other skills, we find that really beneficial to just company culture and what people can bring to the team, essentially. And then on the development side, I think we're at 5 at the moment, and it's kind of a mixture of like WebGL specialists, general front end developers, and sort of full stack developers. So it's quite a mixed bag, and I think everyone, again, like on the development side, everyone has to really get stuck in. It's not just so isolated where you only do one thing all day, every day. It's very much kind of a team mentality and just jumping in where you can to help out, I suppose, to keep the projects running.
There's a pivotal moment, at least from the outside looking in which you start to see on Dribbble, there's more 3D posts happening at what was then GC, and there's more sort of work in the kind of like WebGL and the 3D intersection of that space. And then you start to be doing little passion projects around that, but then ultimately do client projects. But now it seems like that you're kind of almost all in on this sort of 3D meets experiential web space and these story-driven websites. Can you talk about the change in the agency's trajectory and how that shift happened? And was that intentional, or was that just an alignment of everyone's interests at the time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'd say none of what we've done is that all that intentional throughout the years, but we're not that well educated in our decisions. But I think, if kind of rolling back a few years, I can think back to a particular phase where there's like a noticeable shift, and I think there's a few parts to that, really. I think there's certain designers we'd hired at the time. So we'd hired a guy called Dan, who goes by Besser Bold. You might remember him from on Dribbble. He's like prolific. He's just absolutely killing it. So we hired him, and he was the first designer really that we took on that had that 3D capability. Like, he was fairly early on in his 3D career, but certainly, he has some really nice work under his belt, and we just saw that, and I think we were just really excited about that, and that kind of just spurred things on in us. We were like, that's a skill set we could really use. And I guess personally, it was very inspiring for me to kind of just see that that's possible and what you might need to get into that sort of field of work and design work. So it's Dan coming on board. It was we had an intern called Jack, who interned with us for a little bit and then came back as we hired him as a full-time designer. And again, he was really hot on 3D. So it's a kind of a melting pot of people just starting to pick up 3D, and some people already had, much more experience in it. And it was just, quite an inspiring time for us all to be pushing in that aspect on the design side. It wasn't like we were like, oh, we plan to go into this field of design, let's hire these people. It was purely coincidental of, that, his work looks really good, or, he's got a particular project that we love. Let's see how we can sort of build on that. And I think that change in the design team happened around the same time that we started to, I suppose, the development team also changed a lot at that phase as well. So originally when we started out, we hired, they were really good developers, but they weren't necessarily aligned in where we wanted to take the company. They're a bit more kind of traditional developers, and they did us really well. They helped us get out some really good projects early on in the studio kind of history, but I think didn't quite have that same desire to like move into WebGL or like really start pushing on that side of things. So there was a couple of developers, if we're going back. So Ash Thornton joined us, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now, and Jake Whiteley. So these, a couple of developers joined the team, and that just really, shook things up a little bit in terms of where we wanted to take things. And I guess it was just that combination of designers wanting to go into that area, developers wanting to go into that area, and then us as kind of the agency owners really seeing that opportunity of like, we can if we put these people together, if we start getting these skill sets kind of working together, we can really start putting out the work that we really looked up to. You know, we're looking at people like Resin or Active Theory. I mean, even some older studios which aren't going so much anymore, but kind of we're always just amazed by that, I guess, output, the CGI, the kind of more interactive 3D websites. Like, we just always really looked up to that. It's something we'd love to do. So we just, I guess, sort of saw that opportunity and how we could maybe start moving into that area.
Like that seems like crucial to the story, and that shift and now into what is unseen in the work that you're doing. Just to name drop a few projects like North Kingdom, Solara. That may not be pronounced right.
Solara, yeah. It's good enough. It's good enough.
I feel like I should have like a list in front of me, but even like a lot of like the tech companies that you're working with currently that are very story driven and 3D focused. What is the inspiration that you're taking to create these? It almost seems like it looks like movies mixed with video games, mixed with like web. What is your general process from start to finish? Where does the inspiration, the reference, the storyboards kind of come from?
It's a tricky one as well to answer because every project is different. And I think our approach, what I guess our strong point is that our approach is quite flexible. So depending on the project, we can adapt. We can kind of just slightly be a bit fluid with how we approach it to make sure we get the best outcome. And I think a general approach, though, is, you know, back in the day, we'd go away and we'd put together really high fidelity concepts. You know, there'd be like, 2 or 3 unique concepts, all of which would have been really beautiful websites, like award-winning sites. And we kind of split the team up and be like, you know, a group of designers, each one working on a concept. It would almost be a bit like a competition, like who's the best design, who's the best designer, which one's going to win, which was, looking back, like it wasn't really, I wouldn't say it's unhealthy, but it just wasn't a very efficient way of doing things. We weren't really working so much as a team. It was kind of like, you go and do your design, I'll go do mine. Let's see where we get to at the end of it. So I think just the reason I say that is because the shift happened probably over the last, I don't know, like 2 to 4 years, where we've really taken a step back and put a bit more work into sort of planning, strategy, and ideation as a team. So we'll never just jump into concepting now. It's always like planning, whether that's UX planning or just general. If it's a more interactive piece, we'll focus more on sort of storyboards, more similar to an animation or a film script, you know, working back in that sense. So generally, if it's a 3D, like a WebGL experience, we'll kind of storyboard it and ideate at that kind of same sort of time. And I think, in terms of inspiration, it's really comes from all over. Like you say, I feel like a lot of the time with these kind of websites, we are basically walking in the footsteps of game developers and just trying to recreate what they've already done. But it has to be obviously a lot more lightweight and performant to work on the web. So we're just trying to unpick a lot of their techniques from a technical standpoint. So, you know, sometimes it can be working back from that as an inspiration. Like let's figure out a technique and then use that to drive the concept. Other times it's really, you know, just getting into a bit more traditional design work, and whether that's just a design of games, like particular, you know, stories in games or videos, a film, anything like that, really, that we can kind of draw inspiration from. Ideally, that isn't a website. You know, that's kind of the crux of it, is trying not to spend too much time looking at other websites and trying to use that to influence us, because it does get a little bit derivative if you kind of fall into that trap too many times, which I'm sure we've done that plenty of times in our past when we were a bit younger, not necessarily having such a refined process. But now I think we really do try and kind of attack each brief very uniquely, and just really trying to come up with a story that makes sense for it. So that's step one, really.
As a creative leader, how do you encourage creative ideation and pushing the boundaries while still maintaining healthy boundaries with life and work for your team? And you had mentioned kind of, you used to do it where there was like multiple directions and it was kind of like a competition. So how do you now approach it where there's kind of creative synergy with the team so that they're working collaboratively together. So that may be a couple pieces, but I think they intertwine.
I think naturally just the approach now is very much team-based. It's not just go off on your own path and kind of, you work on your own thing. It's very much we'll come together, discuss ideas. Like each step of the process is quite collaborative. So it's not so much just on one person to go away and absolutely grind for a week and come back and have the project finished. I mean, obviously there is some times where it gets a bit crunch time, but yeah, generally in the ideation phase, it's really trying to bring the team together, kind of get the best ideas out of everyone. So we have a bit of, I don't know, I guess a more well-rounded concept and something that's been a bit more stress tested, and we're all bringing ideas to it. And it's kind of a shared process rather than two, isolating everyone doing their own thing. So I think that massively helps with sort of workloads and, as you mentioned, like work-life balance and stress and all these things that can become big blockers when it comes to creative work. I think just having a bit more of a supportive sort of approach and sharing out responsibilities in that way really helps with that. How about on your end? How do you guys kind of treat things at Rogue?
I want it to be more collaborative. It is collaborative, but we do have people individually choosing a direction, but it's more so after we've gone through the strategy phase. Mm-hmm. And so it's more so like we're ideating, we're writing kind of scripts for what the brand could be. It's through like the brand strategy. If we're doing kind of branding and then into web, we'll generally do some sort of content mock-up for what needs to be on this website and why, so that we can get the client working on like copywriting, or we can do some copywriting and get that in tandem. So we're like always working with the client and working together on all the pieces. But then when it comes to, okay, we need to do this branding, we do have separate designers make different concepts, but it's they're choosing the one that they're most excited about. And then we'll have team feedback rounds, and then anyone can engage or tweak or tune any part of anyone else's design. Especially me, I'll go in there and I'll like play around and like shift things around and just kind of have fun, because I have a more, let's say, like 30,000 foot view, because they're in the work and I am kind of out of it. And then until those feedback rounds and or just like playing and nitpicking. So I would like it to be more everyone kind of getting in there and leaving feedback and working on other people's stuff, and if they have the time and availability. But we like to show like multiple concepts based on like the strategy, and usually I find it a little easier for one person to own one thing, and then we collaborate. So I think that's a little bit of where we're at the moment, but it'll probably change and expand over time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, we're not a million miles apart in terms of how we approach things. And I think, as you just mentioned, like for us, it's all about evolving and never being stuck in the process. Like if it's not working, or if we do a year long work in a certain way, and then we talk to the team and there's certain issues, we will try and just amend things. Like we're so open to kind of new ways of doing it. And I think that's served us well, really, just to kind of listen to the team. And if someone brings an idea to us, we'll always try and kind of put that into practice. I think as well, just going back to we didn't talk so much about like the client side of it and how you get clients to kind of, get on board with these sometimes slightly out there ideas. I mean, a lot of the time they're quite out there, but I think really it's just down to that initial process that we put in place now, which we didn't have before. It's all about taking a client on the journey. It's almost like a sort of funnel where you kind of start at the top with these wide strokes of mood boards and general ideas, sort of just really, rough concepts. And then we're kind of always trying to just funnel down until you get to the point of actually presenting the kind of more high fidelity concept. And by that point, the clients are already, because they've been with you on that journey, they're already pretty much, signed it off. They're not in so many words, but it'd be hard for them to be like, what the hell is this? Like, where's this come from? Because they're part of the process. So it just makes the whole thing so much more streamlined. But it doesn't, I'm saying that as if every project we run goes super smooth and there's no issues. Like there's always things that go wrong along that way. And I think along the way, it's, there's no perfect answer to nail every single project. But I just think, yeah, having that kind of general approach has really, really helped us over the years.
Did you find that it was a risky decision to go into this 3D space? It sounded like it happened kind of naturally and you were pushing for it and the developers were pushing for it. But from like a business side, did you find that there was any risk there that you wouldn't find clients in that space? Or did you just find that naturally as you were posting that people had an appetite for that type of work?
Yeah, there was no, I'll be honest, there was no risk because I think it was just, again, the power of Dribbble at the time was you put the work out there, people see the work, they want that work, they want to be, they're coming to us specifically for that. So it wasn't so much as we just kind of started this random new service and we're kind of trying to advertise it, see what trickled in. It was kind of just a natural thing of, we started posting this, people see it, people like it, and they want to, something similar for themselves. So yeah, no real risk in that, I guess. The only risk, I suppose, was when you're going from, a small team that have done a little bit here and there to then actually like a client that's like, I have a really specific brief in 3D, and you know what I mean? It gets a little bit more serious then. You're like, we kind of know how to do it, and I'm sure we can figure it out. But yeah, I mean, that's been our whole history. That's our track record, is just saying yes and figuring it out later. So
I think that's like a beautiful thing to fall into when a client's just like, yeah, we want to do this specifically because we saw that you did that. And then you're like, okay, let's figure out how to make that for a whole website. I mean,
it's like one thing where you've spent, countless hours in your own time figuring stuff out, and you've just about got the thing out there. To then when a client comes in with a very like specific brief of a certain look or visual they want to create, and you've got deadlines and all that kind of thing. It changes the dynamic a little bit of this thing. You're like, I'm just learning for fun, to be like, right, we gotta get this done.
Yeah, let's execute and perform. What is actually like, I'm curious, what is the typical timeline? Obviously every project is different, but what is kind of the typical timeline of a unseen project? Because in my head, I'm like, that 3D work must take a really long time to execute it to its like maximum quality, but also to make sure that it is efficient on the web to where it's performant in a way. So, but it's because we don't do a lot of that 3D at the moment. So it always, when I look at your work, I'm like, that must just take years.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, it does. Again, it's not a very helpful answer. It does definitely like vary a huge amount depending on the type of interactive features and type of scenes we're building and all that kind of stuff. I'd say on average, you're looking at around 4 months for a build, like a design and build, although like fairly, I don't know, nothing too crazy, but like a fairly substantial WebGL portion of that build, you're going to be looking at around 4 months, 3 to 4 months, we generally say. I mean, saying that, there's been like a lot of projects when we were first moving into that space where, timelines just didn't seem like a thing. They were just this imaginary thing that we kind of like, because we're learning so much on the job. There's a project, if I look back, it's I don't know if you can remember the first sort of underwater website we did for the Blue Marine charity. That was very much like a low paid project where we knew we were taking it on because we were going to learn a heap doing it. So we kind of like, we basically, it kind of became the foundations of our WebGL offering, is that project. We learned so much on it. And with that, I suppose you do a few projects like that where they take absolutely ages, and it all balances out, because then you learn that skill set, and then the next ones you can do, are going to be quicker. So yeah, there's certainly been a few of those where you just have to like dig in and just get it done. It's going to take that amount of time to learn. But I think off the back of that, we've then got on to sort of write tools like plugins for Blender. So we have like an optimization and sort of export plugin that we've written for Blender. So it's like a custom part of our pipeline that then speeds up how we export 3D models and scenes from Blender into WebGL. So I suppose it's kind of, you're always looking for ways to invest and kind of, speed up the workflow for the next project that comes along. And you'd think that, with that, every project gets a bit quicker, but obviously then the aspirations get bigger, and you kind of see something else you want to do. And there's always something new and shiny you want to learn and get into a project. So we're kind of our own worst enemies in terms of being profitable and efficient when it comes to getting projects out. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it is, it's just we used to think it took a long time just to build a standard website, just with buttons and layout and interactions. And now there's this whole other part of the process you're contending with. And I think we love it, but it's definitely not without its challenges, and you're just constantly trying to. The other thing is there's not huge amounts of documentation out there. So if you are trying to do something new, it's not necessarily like you can't just necessarily Google exactly how to do it. There's always nuances to, that one, that certain thing you're trying to do, that certain approach, and it does make it take a lot longer. So yeah, I think, long story short, 4 months, but there's so many other parts that have come into that, so many projects, so many longer time spans that make it possible to do it in that sort of time.
And there was something in there that you had said about with the marine charity website that it was a longer timeline because you knew you were going to learn a ton. And I think like that goes back to what we were saying about, oh, you shouldn't work for free. But the thing is, there's trade-offs and compensation for everything, where if you're being, I guess, like compensated with a longer timeline, then the budget could go down because you're learning and you know that it's going to be something that you're going to showcase and ultimately get more work of that type. So I think it's always, there's some like push and pull. It's not always just for money, and not everything is always, the best paying with the best timeline and the best client. You kind of have to, value those things differently at different points of, one, the journey, but also two, like what you need at the time, and learn and take what you can, or build something on your own to then bring to, market and try for yourself with clients. So I do think that all of those trade-offs are valuable. So I never like say like, oh yeah, you shouldn't work for absolute free, because you're probably doing things that are already working for free, like you had already mentioned, on your own time.
Yeah, I would again just totally agree with that. I think there's a difference between working for exposure, which obviously no one wants to do. I don't think that's necessarily right. If someone's being taken advantage of in a way, I think it's different if you are being flexible with your pricing and taking on projects because you can see a better result. We can see there's a portfolio piece, or it might lead to other things. Like there's just so many things to consider when you're thinking about pricing. And I think it was Dan Petty recently tweeted, like, you should never be, he didn't say this exactly, but it was kind of like, you should never be so proud as to just say my price is my price and there's no like negotiation. Like, you should always be open to just evaluating like what that project could bring for you. And we've had it so many times where the lowest paid projects have led to ultimately the biggest budget projects, whether it's with the same client or with other clients, just because we've had that. Often if it is low budget, they'll have more flex in terms of timelines. So that project I mentioned, so much more flex. They knew we were going to be learning on it. They knew we were going to be doing it for a lower price. And with that, we were able to really, really like dig in and skill up. So I just think you should, I just think there's so many variables to kind of unpack when it comes to pricing. And we're never so proud where it's like, this is our minimum quote, or, if a low budget project comes in, we'll still give that the time of day, and we'll still really look into that and see, what the client's trying to do, if we can add value, if maybe there's another approach we could take where it's not going to be a full paid project, but we can certainly get something good out for a lower cost, and it's still going to be, a fun one for us to work on, a good portfolio piece. And, or maybe the client has, it's hard to say, we take on projects on the basis that a client's got big things on the horizon or anything like that, because that's never a good position to be in. But I think just if you can see they're regularly doing kind of campaigns, or there's regular work coming in from them, then there's just so much more to consider than just like a one-off, a flat no or yes, just because it might be a little bit less than you're used to. So it's even just recently, like we just about a month ago started working on a charity project, which was super tight turnaround, very low budget. But again, it's just, the brief was amazing, the clients are amazing, so we're going to jump at it, and we're going to do our best to get it done and not go bankrupt in the process.
Honestly, those type of projects too, they have their own kind of learning opportunities too. If it's a tighter turnaround, but it's for a really good cause and you get to do something really cool, it's like, what are the compromises we have to make to get the best quality idea out in that timeline and hit those deadlines? So like that in its own way, you may work a little bit harder, you may have a fire kind of lit under your ass in a way, but I think that it ultimately teaches you something too about what is the essential piece here that we have to communicate to be successful? Let's focus on that and run with it.
Yeah, and it can also just teach you a lot about your own process and be like, oh, turns out we can do it. We can do it in half the time if like certain decisions are made, and we know. It's all about that, I guess, our mindset when you come into it. Like if you know you have to get out quickly, you just have to be a bit more cutthroat with your thinking and your decisions, and like limiting like client decisions as well. So there's just so much it can bring just from a learning perspective, I suppose.
There are a lot of people that will look up to you and your co-founders and what you built with Unseen and are thinking, how the hell do I do that? How can I build something like that? What would you say to those, let's say, either younger designers or people that want to be in this world of 3D and the interactive experiences that can be made with the new technologies that we have today? How would you, I guess, like, what advice would you give? Like, any bits of either feedback or perspective that you can share?
Yeah, I guess, yes. It's quite a tricky one to answer. I think part of the issue, not the issue, but like part of the hurdle into getting into this sort of design work is it's such a huge learning curve. Like it's not the easiest thing to just fire up, especially if you're on a Mac, because I mean, it's come a lot better than it used to be. But when I was first learning kind of 3D, Cinema 4D, you couldn't even run it on a Mac really. You couldn't really do any rendering. You had to get like this external GPU box, and it's just all very tricky. So even just knowing like technically the kind of tools and software you need to get into it was like quite a big step, I think. And there's so many more resources out there now. I think with Blender these days, it's really obviously it's like free, it's open source, so anyone can download that. I think that's a massive win for people trying to get into it. I guess just going back to how we started, I think a lot of it is just down to that curiosity and just the craft and learning your craft, and not just, I don't know, it's not just going to be this quick overnight thing of like suddenly you're an amazing 3D designer, you're doing these amazing interactive experiences. I think it is something that it's something you really got to put the hours into and work with great people to make these things happen. It's not just, it's very tricky for one person to go and do it on their own. I think the best you can do is find someone, join a team where there's someone doing that already, like learn off of them, and just, even if it's like a lower paid job, just really like just spend the hours just learning the craft, I suppose. And with that, just working with great developers, like you just need really good devs to really like bring your ideas to life and push what you thought was possible. Because a lot of the time, I mean, especially when we were starting out, we didn't have developers that were as aligned with our kind of, ambition creatively. It was really hard. It was like, it's really hard to kind of convince people that this was going to be a good idea. It's going to work. There's even possible to do these things. So the minute you have someone that is on board with that, and the minute we're lucky now, our development team absolutely love it. And we're so like aligned from design and development to make these things happen. So I think just making sure you're working with good people generally, but specifically on development that really know their stuff or all have the same ambition as you to learn it, I think is a really, really powerful thing. But I think as well, it's with this type of design, it's not, as I kind of mentioned, it's not like an overnight thing you can just sort of quickly do and then you're like a master at it. I think it really takes a certain type of person that is very committed to learning it. It's kind of, I mean, for me personally, it was, so like months and months of really shitty renders before anything worth showing came out. And I think a lot of the time these days, people want that instant reward. They want to just fire something up, do it, post it, and that's done. So I guess I just kind of encourage people, like, if you are trying to get into it, it's just good to just be aware that it's a commitment. You do need to spend the time kind of skilling up and learning these things, which sounds obvious when I'm saying it back, but I think it's just a big part of that process, really.
Yeah, you had mentioned your tools that you go to are Blender, Cinema 4D. Are there any other specific tools that you just really love that you found work for you versus, I guess like for your team's workflow? I mean, there's like a bunch out there like Octane, Redshift, some others as well that I can't think of off the top.
They all sort of blend into one. So I'm actually not, when it comes to this, because it's like a bit of nuance to that type of design, and I'm more on this, I suppose, the art direction and like rendering, like pre-rendering stuff, so it kind of sets the tone and visually more so. And then there's the other side, which is very technical, and it's more about kind of how we're going to get that idea from design into development, which is like much more on the technical end. And it's almost, you almost kind of, our developers have to know a bit of that design process, and our designers have to know a little bit of that development process to bring the two together. So I'm not the best person to ask in that regard, because I'm trying to stay out of the, the too techie stuff. I'm just making pretty visuals. That's more my bag. But yeah, so my personal sort of tool set is very much like Cinema 4D and Redshift. That's kind of my bag. And then using things like X particles, like simulations. And that's really it, to be honest. Like stuff I'm doing is fairly, it doesn't take too much other crazy software. Like it's kind of quite focused. But yeah, certainly within the team, like Charlie, one of our 3D designers, he's just always learning a new tool. He's just always picking something new up. I think Houdini's his latest one he's looking into, but it just depends. I think it's such a broad topic, so it really depends on the job you're doing at the time. So often we'll come across a certain project and we'll need to learn a new bit of software just to get that done, really, whether it's like Substance for learning kind of texturing and getting more detailed textures out, or Houdini for more like complex simulations. So it does vary, and it's such a, I guess that's why I come back to the whole idea of it really being something you have to commit to, because even just learning you've learned one tool and you think, cool, I'm on my way. Then it's like the more you know, the more you like realize there is to know. So you just you're just on this sort of, I don't know, endless learning curve.
Yeah. One thing that it kind of like it was sparked by something you said, but ties to our previous thought, was that if you're starting out and you need a developer, but you can't afford to pay a developer, there's probably a lot of people out there. If you reach out, connect with people, maybe they're students, or maybe they're just at the beginning of their career, or maybe they're experimenting in this world, that you could trade services or connect and do a passion project together, invent something, do something that's for the benefit of charity, or you're collecting money for a cause. Like there's a million ways to kind of think about it in a non-transactional way. I know that here in the United States, everything feels very, very transactional. If you're not hustling or making like something for money, then it doesn't feel like there's any value. But the value can be the learning, it can be the friendship, it can be the collaboration, or the work that you're going to potentially get by showing something really astronomically cool or different or unique because you just decided to make it.
That's such a good point as well. I think there's so many people out there looking to, they want those opportunities, and they're not necessarily going to get them because they don't have the portfolio, they haven't had those clients already. So yeah, I think if you can connect with people on a similar level in that field on kind of the opposite side, I think that's such a good idea. Even myself, like just side projects, working, shout out to Jesper. He's a developer, kind of worked with quite a lot, and just my own portfolio and things like that. And it was always just kind of, oh, do you want to just jam on this project? And some client ones and some just, for general learning. So I think those connections you can make are really, really important, especially when you're kind of starting out. I don't know if you've heard of OKDev, the kind of Slack community. I think I'm sure there's lots of like really great creative devs in there. I mean, some of them obviously are like working on client projects the whole time, but I know there's a lot of kind of newer people joining these communities as well. So I think just if you can kind of make these connections between design and developers that all want to do the same thing, then that's a really could be a really nice way of getting into it.
Well, that's what I mean. What I loved about Dribbble was because during that, let's say like early middle period, where there was a lot of conversation about like the work, and it wasn't just like, oh, this is cool, or I like that. It was like actually very inspirational, or you could connect with a lot of people. A lot of like the designers and branding freelancers that we work with at Rogue are connections from Dribbble, because they were just like straight hustling, like making stuff, throwing it up, and it was just like so good. And it's like, where do I find people? What, just like go on Twitter and try to find people talking to each other and like look through their portfolios? It's like there's not enough hours in the day. Like I could see the work and like I know they're good by the stuff they post. Like I don't know a better place to kind of find and connect with people in all sorts of different areas. So Dribbble, fix your shit.
Yeah, do you think? Because I know they've got a new. I think someone's taken over the reins a little bit, haven't they? Kind of a new CEO. So I wonder, do you think it's possible for it to come back?
I hope so. I mean, like, I feel like, I don't know if you've seen it, but based on like the numbers, but there was a period where I would post like almost every day, and I might gain 1 follower every time I post. But prior to that, there was like large jumps in, like, I would post and I'd see a lot of traction, and I was gamifying it like really hardcore, like trying to gamify it. It's like, what's the perfect time to post? Like,
oh man. The exact same. Yeah, I think I like Googled it. So I think someone wrote a blog post on like the perfect time of day to post based on your time zone and all this sort of things. Yeah,
it was because, like, you know, like Weno, Focus Labs, Elegant Seagulls, like, I saw the traction, I saw like what it could do, and like I always assumed that, like, let's say like high numbers of followers equaled visibility, and visibility equaled clients, and clients equaled, you know, progressively scaling and higher budgets. And ultimately there may be some truth in that and maybe not some truth in that, because you could have an audience of, let's say, 40,000 designers, and your whole business model is around serving startup CEOs. That's probably not the same, you know, market that you're trying to tap into. But as a young kid with a hustle mindset, like, I just wanted the big numbers.
The numbers, yeah.
I guess back to my sort of point was, like, there was that slow period, and then there was like a change in the algorithm, and all of a sudden I went from like having like 5,000 followers to like 20,000 followers, but I didn't do anything to like earn it. So I was like, okay, this is kind of weird now in the platform. So I'm like, that's like a bug, not like a feature.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but it felt like we'd sort of, I don't know, it did feel a bit too good to be true as well. It was like we just suddenly ramped up, and it was like the numbers was insane. I was like, this isn't, I don't know, is it actually people that like your work are actually going to be interested in it? Because then you look back and it's like the percentage of people seeing your shots and all that kind of stuff, it didn't really add up. So I don't really know what happened, but we certainly made the most of it whilst we could.
Yeah, exactly. And it made me think about like the article by the founder of Wire, Kevin Kelly, 1,000 True Fans. It made me really think about, like, what is the value of an audience, and what does an audience mean for you? Because an audience on social media has its pros to it. I'm sure it has its cons as well, depending on like the quality of the audience and who they are and what they represent to you. But it made me think, like, oh, this group of people, while it's nice to be like recognized and have that sort of attention, it wasn't doing anything besides just like fluffing my ego up, because there wasn't like a metric value. I wasn't like necessarily getting clients, especially when that algorithm changed. But also I was like, what is important to me? And ultimately, I had to evaluate, what does success look like to Rogue and myself. And this is coming to that same question. I'm curious what success looks like for you, but also what does success look like for Unseen at this time and into the future?
Yeah, again, that definitely resonates in terms of when you're speaking of sort of social media and following and numbers. It kind of does. There's, you know, a few years back, that certainly was. I don't know. It meant more to me. It was more of a thing I was chasing, and I was, you know, really not that it wasn't the main goal, but it was kind of happening. I was like, I was happy it was happening, and I was pushing, and I was kind of grinding, and it was like the same thing with Dribbble. You know, this is back in the day. You get a bit addicted to the, you know, it's that dopamine hit, isn't it? Of someone liking your work or following you. It is addictive. And I had that on kind of Instagram when I was getting more into the 3D side of things, and went through like a really quick period of just stuff blowing up. And it seemed, this is in COVID as well, and I was like, this is insane. Like, what's going on? Like, you just got to, I don't know, it just seems so important as well when you're on that. As we said before, when you have that momentum, you feel like you can't stop. Otherwise, you'll never come back again.
Which so true.
Yeah, and it is kind of true because I've definitely fallen off since that first happened. But I think, I don't know, part of that's just because you do realize that actually you can, especially for me, I was doing like loads more work, kind of personal work outside of like studio work. I was just doing, as I was learning, 3D software and like really pushing that side of things. It wasn't really what we were doing. We were doing some, don't get me wrong, in Unseen, but it was the type of stuff I was doing on my own personal account was kind of very different. And I was really, really like into that and pushing that. And I think, yeah, of course that brought a certain amount of reward and satisfaction. And I was really pleased at the time with, it's cool to be like, yeah, you got how many followers on Instagram and, the work's going down really well and you're kind of growing that audience. But I think now you certainly look back and it's not really that important at all. It's more, for now in terms of success, it's more about like the company and the stuff we produce together and just really growing that, I suppose. Because I think there's certainly a lot of, you can do stuff on your own and it's somewhat rewarding, but it's nothing compared to actually working with a team and like achieving something together in that sense and the sort of bigger picture. It can be quite isolating if you're just focused on your own personal stuff. So I'd say success has definitely changed somewhat. I think maybe I've gone so not too far the other way, but maybe it's a bit older. I don't really have time to just put in that effort of like you're getting home from work and you're doing, another few hours, like just working on your own personal projects. So obviously like where you are in life as well has a big impact on, free time and that side of things. But I just think naturally it's just more like, how can we make Unseen the best studio it can be and just really focus efforts onto that. And in terms of success for Unseen, it's obviously like the quality of work is, the number one driver for us. It's always been the way. Probably to our downfall a lot of the time where, we could be making a lot more money if we'd gone down a route where we weren't so focused on pushing things and like trying new things and learning new skills. So I think now for us though, success is, I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint. I think it is just bringing all that learning over the last 12 years into like a bit more of a well-oiled machine. It's kind of time to maybe just not be going over budget on things or like really putting so much time into R&D or learning new skills. It's really now time to make it a bit more of an efficient business. And with that, work on our marketing, like get some bigger clients on board. Because although we have some really cool, like forward-thinking clients, we don't necessarily have the household names that a lot of the other, bigger agencies do seem to get. So, and we definitely know it's not, that's not the be all and end all. Like having a big brand is by no means like the number one criteria for a project. I think it just helps unlock a bit more budget or like, that the flexibility that might bring. So you're not always so up against it. And, just generally how that impacts the studio is just a bit more breathing space and projects and just not always like grinding quite so much. So I think for us, it's now just trying to be a bit less focused on the creative and a bit more on the business, if that makes sense.
With the shift in going into 3D and interactive experiences, maybe this is just me kind of assuming or presuming, was there some sort of tangible or visual shift that you could see where the studio was growing more so than before? Or has it always been kind of like a slow and steady grind or bar graph going and moving and shifting up and down?
Be fairly steady, I'd say. There wasn't like one year where suddenly like, holy shit, this is blown up, And I think it's so easy to look at it from the outside perspective, and people might think, oh, they must be absolutely killing it. They must, the projects must be really big budget and everything's going like perfectly well. I think behind the scenes, there's just so much that goes on where you're still grinding, you're still kind of taking on work, which, as we mentioned before, that isn't necessarily high budget, and you're still investing in the team and investing in their skills and kind of skilling everyone up. And there's just so much that goes into that. So although, yes, doing those kinds of projects opened up certain budgets, I think the amount we had to kind of invest into those projects as well went up at the same time. So it wasn't just suddenly like we were making more profit on those projects. It was kind of they both went up the same amount. And then, you do more of them, you take on more skilled developers, designers, everything kind of just goes at the same sort of pace. I don't think we've reached that magic point where you're like, oh, and now we're, the profits and margins are way, way bigger than they used to be. I think it's always been quite a slow burn in that sense.
I think what we're really establishing here is that you're a human. You're not a superhuman. You just put the effort, the time, the attention into learning the skills. You also did that with your team. Now you and your partners are really focusing on that from like a business perspective and aligning all the pieces so that it is running as smooth as possible. And I think that's like very beautiful and refreshing, especially me running a smaller studio of just a couple people opposed to 16, which seems really big to me at this moment in time. But I know that like as time moves on and things shift and I focus in on like business systems, team and leadership skills, like that will have a trajectory. It's always interesting hearing the behind the scenes story to see if like, if Lady Luck was just really good to you and you're off to the races. You somehow booked Nike. And I'm like, how the fuck does that happen?
Yeah, I wish. It's a bit of a cliche to say you kind of make your own luck, but I certainly think if you work really hard, then the amount of opportunities that come to you are like just increased. So I definitely think that's true for us. And that's always been the way. We just know if we work hard and keep pushing, like good things are going to happen. And they generally have. So again, it's not, when we're talking about success, it's not that we're so, it's really easy to be like, oh, we haven't got Google on our client list. We haven't got whoever it might be, like these dream clients. But I think ultimately, if you're working on stuff you really love and the clients are really great to work with, they have like, they're forward thinking, they have these really good ideas. And like, really, there isn't much more to it than that. If you're ticking those boxes and obviously getting paid the right amount to do it, then it doesn't matter if it's a Nike or a unknown, startup.
No, I couldn't agree more. And like, I haven't worked with them, but I'm assuming that there's layers of bureaucracy and there's more people and managers and levels that you have to push ideas up the chain in order to get the good ideas across. So like, is there trade-offs with working with those bigger clients? Are they going to let you do the thing that you want where like a smaller client would because they are just so excited about the collaboration? So obviously maybe the answer is yes to both and maybe no to both, that those opportunities all come with their own little things. But yeah, I guess like I agree, and that it's not always about the name. It's cool if you got it, but also like maybe you're the reason that company X gets to be bigger and bigger and bigger and rises to the level of one of those like Fortune 500 companies. Yeah,
absolutely. That's such a good point. I think being part of that journey early on is really rewarding as well. And just seeing how design can like just completely, obviously the company, they got to do the work themselves, but like how design can really give them a leg up and push them. But I think for us, I don't want it to sound like we're like so focused on getting big brands. I think it's more just about in terms of what we can bring, in terms of our skill set offering, like how that might open more doors. So a lot of the time our projects are one-offs. They kind of do a marketing site for a new company, or, a brand's got a certain thing coming out, like do the site for that thing. And it sort of ends there, apart from a few clients where they are kind of ongoing clients, and that's really good. We kind of just see those bigger brands as having more, they're just doing more marketing. There's a bigger push and a wider campaign we can get involved with. So whether that's doing a website, but also doing maybe like an installation or like a bit of like, XR sort of immersive stuff as well. So I think it's just, the kind of spectrum of types of projects we can touch with a bigger client is really appealing to us. So it's mostly driven by that, to be honest, because we've been doing like the immersive sites for quite a while now. And we are a little bit looking for that next move, and like what's our next sort of skill set we want to be, sort of area we want to be moving into.
Well, I think that's a fantastic next question, which is, what is that next move for Unseen? Is it AR, VR? What is like the technologies or the areas of design that you're really, really excited about? And I guess like we talked about that you guys need to do less R&D and more business systems a little bit, but like I'm sure knowing you and your mentality that you're already jonesing for the next thing to experiment with.
I'm probably already going to contradict everything I said in this podcast. It's a good segue. I guess we are definitely trying to move into that sort of VR space, like whether it's full VR experiences or maybe doing some sort of simpler AR stuff. There's just so much that we do on the web that can be ported over to like more kind of in-person installations and that sort of thing. So we'd really love to do more of that. For one of the we've got that kind of ongoing relationship with that Blue Marine Foundation, which is a blue marine charity, and with that there's a lot of projects. So we did the first couple of web experiences. We then also did like a VR version of one of them. So that's the sort of thing we really want to be moving into. I say that as a studio, in terms of like immersive tech, that's where we want to be going. Personally, on like a personal note, I suppose it's more, I've always been like driven and sort of attracted to the kind of 3D rendering side of like 3D motion design. The kind of stuff that the big studios put out, like Man vs. Machine, Tendril, Future Deluxe, all these like more animation-based studios. So that's kind of where I guess my personal sort of inspiration, ambition is drawing more to at the moment, like moving a little bit away from actual websites and experiences and focusing more on like branded content and how I can kind of work more on the animation and motion side of things.
Like, what are the essential skills or the one thing that you think that would be really indicative for someone to kind of pay attention to at this present moment in time?
I was going to say carpentry before you said in the industry.
You're right. That'll never go out of style.
Yeah. You can't do AI carpentry. No, I guess in our industry, it's really hard because I think, even I don't know what I'd learn if I had to come into it fresh, because it's just so much is changing at the moment, even especially. It's like so much is changing. It's really hard to pinpoint which areas are safest, or, which areas are going to hold the most value for the longest time. And I kind of think it's those more general skill sets, which I'm not sure what I'd say to go and learn, but I think it's just generally, if you're always operating, there's in the same way when we started out, we were always trying to do kind of these websites which were different. They were more like storytelling and interactive, when 90% of websites were kind of a bit more cookie cutter kind of WordPress templates. So I think if you're always aspiring to be on the kind of that 10%, which is doing things a little bit differently, coming at things with a slightly different perspective, then you're always going to be fairly safe. And that's not really a specific skill set or anything, any like particular like software to learn. I just think if you're kind of operating in that smaller percentile, which is not necessarily doing the norm and doing what everyone else is doing, if you're kind of just trying to find your own path that's doing things a little bit differently, obviously you've got to make sure, you've got to validate that there's actually a want for it, and it's a kind of a business move you can make. But I think just having that approach creatively, where you're just trying to always come up with something that's not been done before, or the thing that's going to make people, like a company, stand out, you're going to be a little bit safer than if you're maybe just going through the motions of what everyone else is doing, sort of thing.
And you had even mentioned way earlier in this conversation about trying to stay off platforms where you're looking at other websites or things that are particular within industry. Is that just a standard part of your process because you're trying to stay away from those things so it doesn't become homogenized and just a reflection of what everything else looks like at that time? And if that's the case, like, where are you going for your personal inspiration, or as a company? Like, what are the things that excite you guys and want to try more?
I guess my point was like try and avoid, if you're, I don't know, designing a website for a crypto startup or whatever, don't go looking at other crypto startups for inspiration. Or if you're designing a brand for a certain industry, like don't just look for similar brands in that industry. It's always just trying to do, or it's just trying to position it so it's you're kind of coming at it with a completely different perspective to what's been done before. And that's, I don't know, there's a part of it which obviously there are, trends exist for a reason. There's certain patterns, and especially in UI and that kind of thing, where you can't just go completely left field and just do something that's not going to work and is like not functional. But I think in terms of looking for inspiration, it's always trying to, if you're, even like we said before, if you're designing an interactive experience, maybe look at film and, I don't know, like comic book art styles, or more like traditional art in that sense, rather than just looking at other interactive websites. And I just think that generates much more unique ideas. And I guess in a, like it's a bit closer, but even just when we're looking at kind of 3D for the web, we're kind of looking at more of those like beautiful brand pieces that aren't, they haven't been translated into web experiences. They are purely just like pre-rendered 3D kind of animations essentially, but just seeing how we can maybe take some of that and bring that into a more like immersive experience. So it's trying to be, I guess, it doesn't mean you have to go completely away from like similar bits of design, but just trying to be a bit like adjacent to your current like thinking and projects you're working on. But I mean, in terms of like looking for inspiration, I don't know, I'm still like a sucker for just all the like Pinterests of the world, you know, and Cosmos, and you know, there's all these sites out there where I just, they're so good at, you know, matching, like you've got an idea and they can bring together like similar pieces of content. You do start to like fill out that mood board a bit quicker. Like there's nothing really different than that, to be honest. We've had some like just random things happen. Like we're working on that Cult of the North website, which is like a Swedish game company, and we just happened to have this board game in the studio called I think it was Odin's Ravens, and it was very much similar to like the Nordic lore. It just gave us some like it was just like lying there in one of our boxes, and we just chanced upon it, and it, you know, that helped to spur some ideas. So I just think always being open to different sources of inspiration and trying to get away from the screen as much as possible, like into books and stuff which isn't just, like I said before, Pinterest or the award sites, like just mixing it up as much as you can.
Anyone who wants to create new ideas needs to do that, needs to be in the world and actually do things besides just be on the computer. I think we have to experience and really dive into exciting things that could light us up and continue to fuel us creatively, even if it's not directly related. And so I'm curious, what is Nathan Riley doing off of the screen?
I do find it quite nice just to do stuff offline, which is completely detached, to be honest. I think that's the best thing you can do. Like I try and run quite a lot, and like very occasionally go mountain biking, less frequently than I used to, but just stuff which does completely detach you from the day-to-day, because I think that's so easy just to get in your head and just, you know, we've all probably started in this career because it's a hobby of some sort, and the more you can do just to separate that a little bit and just get like some clear headspace, I think even if you're not like finding inspiration, you're just getting that break, and that really helps to reset.
What is like the perfect target audience or client for Unseen? I'm curious about how you're specifically targeting those people and what you're doing to kind of attract them to you. I'm curious if there's any strategies that you have, maybe for the audience, if they're looking to kind of do something similar or attract clients that have like a similar mindset of exploration and creativity, and they can push them further.
Our whole kind of marketing efforts really have just been outbound. So like when we launch a project, we really try and make sure we get the mileage from that project and, you know, promote it on the award sites, promote it on Twitter, LinkedIn, all these places, and just try and, you know, we spend a lot of time even just on the launch video. Like that's it's almost I mean, it's a mini project in itself, like getting the promo piece together so that when we finally finish the project, we can actually launch it. So we do put a lot of effort into the outbound side of things and just making sure, I suppose, all bases are covered. And whether that's trying to do, more recently, we started trying to do like insights articles. So although they are technically aimed at peers, you know, people like you and I, they're kind of aimed at people that are interested in maybe the tech or the design process. I think there's just an area of that where maybe at bigger companies, you have design, you know, more design-led companies, and you have designers and marketing people within those companies that are actually really interested in the industry. So you're kind of attracting them through kind of teaching them a bit as well. It's super hard to say if that's like exactly having rewards, because I think it's quite a soft marketing approach of just putting as much out there as you can and just hoping that it reaches the right eyes. But yeah, I think we do put it down to that kind of ripple effect. Like the more ripples you create, you know, eventually one of them's going to reach up that, you know, intended audience and that intended person, whether it's a client, whether it's a designer hoping to join the team, you know, like whatever it is, we're just always trying to keep that going. And I mean, as you'll know, like marketing takes a backseat a lot of the time once you get busy, and it's like the last thing you have time to do. But yeah, we do try and keep it ticking over as much as possible. And yeah, that's probably one of the hardest parts of running the studio, is just not being able to be, you know, you have this plan in your head of like, oh, we've got this project launching, in 2 months after that, we're going to launch another one. We should get all this attention. But then before you know it, one of them, the client's gone quiet, or, launch date's been pushed for whatever reason. And then the other one, the project's gone a different way. And before you know it, your 6 months of projects going out turns into like 2 projects going out. And, it's a really unpredictable industry. And I think that's one of the hardest things to keep a track of, is just like your marketing efforts. So yeah, we always try and, even if we don't have a client project going out, like try and make sure we have some activity, whether it's newsletters or maybe like a passion project, like you mentioned, like always trying to keep pushing really, and make sure we're kind of just there in the background. Like even if it's, it might not be a direct project that you've seen, but just there's something ticking over, keeping people's minds a little bit.
You want to pop into someone's head as frequently as possible, because when they finally need you, then if you're there, then they can email you. Because I think about how many designers or requests I get like from any given day in my inbox. There's no way I'm going to remember your name like 2 months from now, because I have so much going on. And that's like also the case of like clients or prospective clients. It is our job to kind of follow up with people if they do jump in our inbox, and then continue to try to chat with them and get that project across the finish line, or prospective project across the finish line. And then create things when there's nothing to show. I
think we've been a bit antisocial as a company for a while. Like just sat here churning websites out, churning stuff out, and hoping it comes to us. And now we're trying to, change that up a little bit. Whether that's, I think I actually saw you're doing a talk at the awards in New York, the conference.
Yeah, in December I will be giving a talk at awards. So if you want to come by, we can hang out and have a beer.
Oh man, are you prepared? Is it going well?
I haven't started.
Yeah, so we're doing one in September. I'm not going to say on this podcast we haven't started. Awards, if you're watching, we definitely started. But it's I'm just saying, like doing things like that, going outside your comfort zone, even if it's just reaching out to people as well, like doing these things to get your name up there, and a bit more of a, that isn't just so sort of recessive and waiting for things to come to you. I think that's kind of a little bit of a motivation for us at the moment.
Let's pivot to some fast and fun questions, maybe so you're not so on the spot and and in the hot seat, literally and metaphorically.
Okay.
But I'm curious, what is one book, film, or show that has kind of changed you as a person?
I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say it's changed me as a person, but like the TV show Severance has really, like, that just really, like, I don't know, just hit home for me. I just absolutely loved it.
I haven't seen it. I'll have to check it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's on Apple TV. Even just like the opening credits, it was like done by a 3D artist that I follow and stuff like that. And just, I don't know, the whole tone of it, the way it was shot, everything like that. It just such a really well put together piece. I just, really loved that.
Because you were sipping on a beer, what is the best UK beer or local brewery in Bristol?
Oh, that's an easy one. I can definitely answer that. That's so this brand, Wiper and True, they're a local Bristol brewery. They're just the best. Definitely my personal favourite. But yeah, they're kind of based across town. Just absolutely, obviously really good at making the beers, but they've got like a couple nice like tap rooms and stuff. So if you want a nice day out, like they're really good spot in Bristol.
Nathan, as we're drawing to a close here, are there any promotions from the studio side, from a personal side, or just in general, last wise words to share with the audience?
Keep an eye on us. We've got some cool stuff coming out, cool projects coming out, so keep an eye for them. Just in terms of like general, just if it's advice, or for anyone maybe that's a bit more junior starting out, I think there's certainly like a big wave of I just see a lot of social media of like design subscription companies and AI prompt people, and there's not a huge amount of focus just on like the craft and people just designing and really learning the skill so much these days, it feels like. So yeah, I guess I would just, if it was, if I'm talking to like my younger self or someone that is just a bit earlier on in the career, I think definitely try and find those people that are still really, really focused on the details and the craft and putting the time in, and that will set you in good stead, sort of thing, for the future. And there's a lot of, there's all these, I don't know, it feels like quick wins of how to make $1 million in 6 months, whatever it is, without, I don't want to throw shade to anyone, but it's there's just a lot out there which could be potentially misleading, I think, to a lot of people starting out. And I just think you just can't forget about just putting the time in and you know, learning the craft. And maybe you don't have to be as obsessive as I was about Dribbble and doing personal projects and work and stuff like that, but just find your own route in, I suppose, of the thing you really love and the thing you're really passionate about getting involved in, and yeah, just go for it.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Nathan, thank you so much for just coming on the show in general. I mean, like, I've had a blast just chatting with you as you're melting in your summer.
Yeah, I'll get the ice cubes out after this. But no, I was going to say thanks for having me on, man. It's been really fun.
So to the audience out there, remember that we're all legendary and have an amazing story of our own. So on that journey, take the time to be kind, grind, and unwind. And let's make the world a better and more creative place to live. Nathan, thank you so much. If you stuck around this long, clearly you liked the episode. So do us a favor, like, comment, tell us your favorite moment from the show. What did you learn from Nathan? And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on great episodes like this. All right, see you in the next one. Cheers.